Stuart, you were at the child abuse inquiry yesterday, listening to Mario Lundy give evidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Certain parts of his evidence was reported by the state media, but more crucially, certain parts weren't. What, from your perspective, were the big news stories of the day yesterday?
Well, there were several major issues, one of which was the revelation that the BBC were using Ho de la Garenne for a period of time in the early 1980s to film as a filming base for the Bergerac series. And the fact is that whilst we knew that that had happened, it was revealed yesterday that none of the BBC personnel coming or going from the site had been vetted. And Mr. Lundy couldn't say with any certainty if they didn't in fact also have access to and were able to get into the other half of the building where vulnerable young people were living. Now this is very serious given what we know these days about Savile and other abusers in the BBC, and it's quite remarkable, or not perhaps, that none of the Jersey media had reported this very concerning issue.
Yeah, but I say none of the state media reported that. So the part of the headline news on state radio yesterday was that that you were on a witch hunt against Mario Lundy, because that's part of his evidence. But of course, you did offer the BBC an interview, did you not, yesterday?
I did, yes. I offered to speak to the BBC yesterday. They declined. They weren't especially interested.
So they ran a story, if you like, on the prosecution case, but declined your offer of the defence case. Where have I heard that before?
Well, this is classic BBC in Jersey. Certainly that kind of attitude is true of all of the Jersey media, but the BBC in particular have got a very, very seriously bad track record in this area, particularly when it comes to the child abuse issues. We know for a fact that the BBC in Jersey helped to falsely trash the reputation of the good former police chief Graham Power. I gave BBC in Jersey a lot of evidence, for example, Mr. Power's statement to Wiltshire, and the BBC from that day to this have refused to report any of that balancing evidence, the defence case for Mr. Power as it were, and more importantly the defence case for Operation Rectangle, because now we know with the recent announcement of a fresh investigation, Operation Whistle, it's now in fact proven that Operation Rectangle was right and justified.
So, and of course, yesterday, as part of Mario Lundy's evidence, he accused you of acting, which I do believe this was reported on the state media, in some of the state media, that you were acting outside your remit and conducting an investigation that you were not entitled or qualified to. How do you respond to that?
That observation by Mr. Lundy is one of the most, I think, significant kind of factors to have emerged so far in the public inquiry, because it's immensely revealing of the toxic dysfunction, the anti-public interest culture that exists within Jersey's public sector. These people, these states departments, these senior civil servants and Crown officers simply believe that they are not accountable democratically to the people of Jersey. They believe that they should be immune to proper oversight and proper scrutiny by the democratic process. Now that's obviously a fundamentally wrong and anti-democratic attitude. You and anyone else as a voting member of the public, even a non-voting member, you've got a right to go to your elected representative and ask them to inquire on your behalf into matters of concern that may have affected you in the public sector. That's one of the core rights of the public and one of the core functions of a politician. So, if you were to ask a politician to look into something that concerned you, you've got a right for that politician to do that. But more fundamentally, even than that basic democratic right of holding the public sector to account through your politicians, when I first began investigating the child abuse cover-ups, which we now all know did happen, I began to investigate that in late 2006 and throughout that first half of 2007, long before anyone was aware of Operation Rectangle, long before there was any public expression at all about these issues. During that period of time, I was the Minister for Health and Social Services. And so not only was I, as the Minister, actually fully empowered and fully entitled to investigate child protection failures under the Children Jersey Law 2002, in fact, the Minister is actually obligated to investigate child protection issues that are brought to his attention by that law. It's not a free choice. The law says the minister must investigate issues of concern in respect of child abuse. And that is what I was doing. And I was being absolutely opposed by a variety of very senior civil servants and senior managers of social services who clearly, as now we all know, had a history of very, very poor behaviour and in some cases actual abuse towards vulnerable children.
Because, and it was reported, and it was mentioned again yesterday during Mario Lundy's testimony, that you encouraged people to, because there's a big thing here, make complaints. Although Channel Television reported that you were encouraging people to make allegations. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you respond to that when you're being, I don't know, accused, if that's the right word, of...
That's what the local media said, yes. Syvret accused of encouraging people to make complaints. That was what they said.
So how do you answer that then? Were you encouraging people to make complaints? Were you encouraging people to make allegations? What?
I was certainly encouraging former residents and survivors and victims to make formal complaints initially to the department, and when the serious of the matters started to emerge and I started to fully grasp the magnitude of what had gone on for these decades, I certainly was encouraging them to take their complaints to the police. And that's absolutely the right and proper thing to do. You know, if your politicians get made aware of conduct in the public sector that could well be criminal, of course you encourage your constituents, these people that have been failed by the system, you encourage them to go to the police. That's exactly the right thing to do. And I'm glad that I did so. As events have proven, these people were right. The system did abuse them and treat them extremely poorly. The inference in the reporting, of course, by the local media is somehow that I somehow might have encouraged people to make false allegations, and that is categorically untrue. I never in any way, shape or form have said to any person ever that they should make a false or exaggerated claim. Categorically never. And indeed, again, as events have shown, we have now some abusers convicted. We have the states having issued a fundamental apology for decades of child abuse and child protection failure. We have, in fact, this major public inquiry underway. Recently, there's been the announcement of Operation Whistle. So absolutely clearly, the whistleblowers who came to me, the survivors, the victims who came to me, and we were right. We were right and the system was wrong.
To finish on, the care inquiry, or the child abuse inquiry is carrying on. I think it carries on next week. Are you going to be keeping a close eye on it? Are you going to be attending the meetings?
I will attend some of them, I think, when there's something of particular relevance and particularly important witnesses appearing. I mean, certainly a lot of interesting and useful stuff has emerged from the inquiry. As you know, I've got certain issues with it myself, and I'm not entirely persuaded it's going to necessarily really get into the heart of the fundamental breakdown in the rule of law of Jersey's entire polity, which is what we're dealing with here. I think, you know, we're on what's going to be a long, hard path yet, and we've got a lot of things to see through. There will be Operation Whistle. There may well be serious prosecutions arising from that. There is going to be the overarching United Kingdom Goddard review, which, in spite of what's been said about it not looking at the Crown dependency so far, that may change. So I think, you know, we're looking still at some years of hard work, but I'm sure we'll get there at the end of the day. We will make the public system in Jersey accountable, and we will get rid of this culture whereby these civil servants who are constantly having meetings themselves and covering each other's backs and getting their stories straight and covering up grotesque failures in the public system, they will start to understand that they've got to be accountable to the people, they've got to be accountable to the public's politicians, and the ordinary members of the public, like survivors, are absolutely entitled to have meetings to raise issues and to want to hold the public sector to account. That is democracy, that is the proper rule of law.
This is one of the things that the victims and survivors at the care inquiry have been, I don't know, criticised for by the likes of Mario Lundy and civil servants, that they've held a meeting amongst themselves, as if that's a bad thing. but surely the victims and survivors are only doing the same thing as the civil servants are doing.
Of course, the fact that such a complaint, as it were, can be made by the civil servants is in itself, frankly, extraordinary and revealing of the toxicity of public administration in Jersey. The notion that members of the public are not allowed to meet and shouldn't meet to discuss their mutual concerns over grotesque failings by the public sector is an utter absurdity. Civil servants meet constantly, usually professionally, under taxpayers' time and expense, and they do cook up stories together, they arrange things, they get their stories straight, they cover each other's backs, they help to cover up not only the abuse and the child protection failures, but all kinds of other grotesque failings by the public sector in Jersey. I know certainly that lots of civil servants and others have meetings, private meetings in the evenings at certain places to get their stories straight, and of course they do this interdepartmentally, often at taxpayers' expense during work time, and the result has been not only decades in this instance of child protection failure, but all kinds of other really bad things that have gone wrong in Jersey, and the civil servants cover things up. The power that they have to bury things is absolutely toxic, and you can see in the remarks of people like Mr. Lundy that they just don't understand that this notion that they should be accountable to the public, and that the public actually are their bosses, and that they have a duty to actually serve the public, and they've got to stop criticising the public and the public's democratically elected representatives who want to hold this very expensive, bloated public sector to account.